Freddie, thanks so much. In 3 weeks from today, early voting begins in the Texas primary. Texas Democrats weighing their choices for U.S. Senate, heard directly from the top two contenders. During this weekend's debate, moderated by KXAN, James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett mostly agreed on policy, but sought to differentiate themselves on their approaches to fighting.
The best indicator of future behavior is past behavior, and the people in this room know that I have fought tooth and nail for our values in the Texas House of Representatives.
I am here to tell you that I am not just sitting in D.C., I am getting out into the streets. And right now, to be perfectly honest, if we're gonna win and keep our country, we're gonna need somebody who can file bills, but also knows how to be a street fighter.
Okay, we want to talk more about the state of that race as well as some other political headlines this week with two former Texas lawmakers, Dennis Bonnen joining us again, a former Speaker of the House who represented Southeast Texas, and then Mark Strama back with us as well, previously served as a Democratic representative for the Austin area. So thanks to you both for making your way here, I hope safely through some of the lingering Austin ice.
No problem.
We want to start with that debate this weekend. Mark, I want to start with you because it was hosted, we'll remind everybody, in front of the Texas AFL-CIO. Ultimately, that group actually took no action to endorse one candidate or the other afterwards. A lot of eyeballs were on that potential endorsement. So what do you think that says about this matchup and who might have the upper hand heading into early voting? Makes it a bit hard to tell.
Well, yeah, it probably says nothing at all about the matchup and who has the upper hand. It's hard to tell who has the upper hand. The most recent polling, there was an Emerson poll the week before the debate where Tallarico had a 9-point lead. In response, the Crockett campaign released an internal poll that said she had a lead. Generally, you want to look toward the third-party polls as being an unbiased source. Tallarico had a steeper hill to climb in this race because he had less statewide name recognition. And it seems that he has at least closed that gap, if not exceeded the gap. And then going into the debate, there was some press coverage that I think was favorable for Tallarico. Besides the Emerson poll, Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times, which admittedly is not a Texas-based publication, but a lot of Democratic primary voters in Texas are influenced by it. Michelle Goldberg wrote an article about how the issue of electability is fair game in this primary. That question has been attacked by Crockett and her supporters, but it is fair game, and she made a compelling argument that he's the more electable candidate. I think he went into the debate with momentum, and I don't think the debate changed anything.
And Dennis, I asked one of our guests during the post-show of the debate, this was our Republican representative on that panel, about who the Republicans would rather see advance to the general election. Care to share your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think Republicans are far more interested in seeing Jasmine Crockett. With that said, I don't think they're afraid of James Tallarico. But Jasmine Crockett is going to be, easier to run against by the pure fact that she built a profile. It's sort of what Mark talked about. I mean, no disrespect to Tallarico, he's very talented. They're both actually incredibly talented. I'll give them that. But Jasmine Crockett is gone, and she's going to run away from this, I assume, once she gets through the primary if she wins. She's tried to be the AOC of Texas. Well, let me tell you, AOC don't work in Texas, and the AOC of Texas is not going to succeed. So she's built that profile. She'll have to undo that. Tallarico, in fairness, no disrespect to him, has no profile of that sort. I mean, most people don't have a clue who he is. And so he doesn't have to undo, I'm the most liberal and extreme member of Congress, vote for me in Texas. He doesn't have to undo that problem. She will. And I don't know if she'll even try to. I mean, the little of the debate, she said, well, it's how you go about it. Well, I don't think you win as a Democrat in Texas being the most angry, vitriol, and outlandish candidate.
Well, we want to note as well that KXAN and our parent company Nexstar have extended multiple invitations to the Republicans running in the Senate primary, but so far there's been no agreement on that. Dennis, I want to hear from you about how much incentive is there for all those candidates to meet on one stage ahead of the primary? Is there
very little?
Okay. Why is that?
Very little, because one, I think they all believe there'll be a runoff. And so if there's a runoff, they probably don't want to share that stage, because what happens when they share that stage is someone's going to anger and offend the other. And leading into runoffs, you usually try to not be overly offensive to anyone else. Now, with that said, I think Cornyn and Paxton are trading blows. I think there's also so much money in the race.
A lot.
And so when there's so much money in that race, the value of a debate is to get some free attentions, to get some free media. Well, the two leading candidates in that race are not short on dollars, so they're not saying, hey, maybe I need to go get on that stage and provide that opportunity.
We know we're going to be talking a lot about these primaries with you all, hopefully coming back in the coming weeks. But we want to turn now to some other news from this weekend that's really dominating the headlines: the deadly shooting of a second person by federal immigration agents in Minnesota. On Monday, we'll note for our audience, Texas Governor Greg Abbott publicly said that ICE should recalibrate what it's doing. And then we're hearing from some Republicans as well, Michael McCall calling for an investigation into this shooting. So Dennis, what do you make of these key Republicans' response to what's happening in Minnesota?
I think they're being intelligent and they're not being oblivious to what's happening. One thought that I had that I think fits into this is that, what is, and I don't know how ICE works, but what is the cycle? Meaning, how often are these officers moved in and out of an area? I think part of the shooting this weekend, it's horrific tragedy. It probably should not have happened. But I also get the impression that you've got ICE officers that are reacting overly aggressive to what they've had happen to them the last 2 weeks. And I'm not excusing the behavior, but I think that it's also, Mark hosts this great dinner through the Annette Strauss Institute that he does. And, was it last year or the year before, you put the item on the wall and you said, what do you see? And people saw different things. Democrats see a totally unjustified shooting. I think some Republicans see, at least I'll speak for myself, see, I'm not sure I would have shown up with a gun in clips. He obviously didn't have the gun out. I see ICE agents who are probably tired of having people stick their camera phone in their face and try to provoke them. And so they overreacted. And I think they made a mistake. With that said, I get how they got there. And so I think there's only rational people would point out there probably needs to be a reset. There needs to be something done differently. Now, I don't think different is you withdraw ICE and just say, oh, sorry, we don't want to take the worst of the worst out of our communities. But I think you've got to somehow tamp down the vitriol. And it comes from both sides, by the way. I think the governor of Minnesota has not been helpful. I think the mayor has been atrocious. And I think that the reality of it is everyone is to blame for these tragedies, not one side versus the other.
Okay, you could knock me over with a feather that you were paying attention during that speech and that you're now quoting it, but I have been using exactly that example. I showed an optical illusion, actually showed that famous blue dress, white dress optical illusion where some people see it blue, some people see it white. And I say that we are all inclined. There was a bunch of neuroscience research after that happened, and it found that when there's insufficient data, we interpolate the ambiguity and replace it with certainty based on our priors. So people, I used this example more commonly in the Renee Good shooting. People saw her driving at the agent if their priors were to assume the agent's in the right, and people saw her trying to avoid the agent if their priors were that she's a peaceful protester. I saw a peaceful protester in that video, other people saw it differently. It's not to say there's no objective truth, there is one, but our prior beliefs, our ideological tribe, shape the way we see these events. What has been really reassuring to me, well, not really reassuring, but of some comfort to me in the last 48 hours, is that that event over the weekend has elicited a response from Republicans. I will tell you candidly, Democrats are really worried that Republicans no longer believe in rule of law, and because Trump has such a powerful hold on the party. And to see some Republicans standing up and saying, we need to put some boundaries on this is comforting to some Democrats.
Well, look, President Trump just did that himself. I mean, he made the decision to take the leader of ICE out of that community. I think he's probably leaving today or tomorrow. He is sending his border SAR, or Homeland Security, wherever he is.
Border SAR, yeah.
Home and down there, or up there. And so I think the problem is, and I mean this with sincerity, at some point, when are all the talking heads and the electeds going to, and I know it started to change, thank God, but I mean, peaceful protest is not a camera phone yelling, screaming in your face, praying to provoke you. That has nothing to do with a peaceful protest. And at some point, people are going to react. And that poor gentleman who was killed, I'd love to understand why he thought he should take his gun in loaded clips. With that said, do I think he deserved to die for that? Hell no. But I want to know why he thought he should do that.
You know,
and
to the
I
blue
think
dress, white dress thing, though,
I get
what Democrats
would
in the show
say.
is,
I
look,
get
here's
it.
Kyle Rittenhouse, who was celebrated by Republicans
Well,
for taking.
I'm not sure he was celebrated, but he was protected for the fact, well, let's not fall into that. But,
Yeah.
but where I'm going is, I find it horribly problematic with what is going on in America when there are actions being taken by both sides, and neither side until now, until literally the last 48 hours, has been willing to say, maybe we all need to take a breath. Maybe we all need to take it down a notch. Because let me be clear, in my view, peaceful protesting is not antagonizing law enforcement. And that's what has created these tragic situations. Now, I don't want to blame the victim here. They're both responsible, but I don't know why electeds and others want to keep saying, keep going at them.
Yeah, I know you got to go. I think there is also a big picture here where we're recalibrating, to use the governor's words, but recalibrating the overall immigration enforcement effort. And that's there's a huge divide between Democrats and Republicans on this, but there is also some middle ground where everybody agrees where the excesses are.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have questions about, types of tougher immigration enforcement, if this falls in line with that, but we will have to pick up that conversation at another time. But Dennis and Mark, thank you again for joining us and for sharing some insight about this. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.